Draw near to God, and God will draw near to you. That's some good advice, and that's also some profound faith. To be able to say so confidently that God is simply there and responsive to us, to each and every one of us, is to know at one's core what it means to be human. To be human is to know that we live in love with God and that God is with us always. That was the last line, that draw near to God and God will draw near to you, was the last line from the letter of James. And James is full of wisdom and good advice such as this. Of course, this is preceded by James writing about wisdom and the qualities and characteristics of a person who possesses wisdom. James also addresses the root cause of conflict between people, eloquently describing it as beginning with the cravings that are at war within us. To crave, to desire, is also part of what it means to be human. We have very real needs for life that need to be attended to: food, shelter, clothing, companionship, and relationship. All of these we are wired to need and desire in order to live healthy and fulfilling lives. These cravings and desires are not the whole story of our lives, however, but it is very easy to let them take charge. It is easy to put our energy into what we think we need, making sure we find it for ourselves, that we do end up at war inside of ourselves, a war that is so easily enacted upon other people. So much of what we do as adults and in relationship with others is learning about ourselves and how to keep these warring desires inside of us in check. We have been gifted with reason, the ability to think through whatever it is inside of us that is causing conflict in our lives and in our relationships. With reason, we are able to find solutions to these conflicts inside of us, solutions to the conflicts in our relationships, including the best solution of all, which is drawing near to God, who will draw near to us. We see this at work in today's gospel. When I first read the gospel for today, I thought how ambitious these disciples seem. Ambitious is a curious way to describe the disciples, these people who are on a clear spiritual journey. So I got curious and looked up the definition of ambition. And what I found is so timely for us and for our country. Ambition is defined as eager or inordinate desire for some object that confers distinction, as preferment, honor, superiority, political power, or literary fame. Desire to distinguish oneself from other people. And the second definition of ambition is an object of inordinate desire. But the best part is that the word ambition comes from the Latin ambitio, which means a striving for favor, literally a going around. The AMB part of ambition comes from ambulance, or this is called an ambo. It's something that we walk to, something that travels. So ambition, ambitio, striving for favor, a literal going around, especially of candidates for office in Rome soliciting votes. So ambition has at its root an electoral process, candidates seeking votes for whatever office they are running for. Now the disciples are really ambitious. They are vying for who is going to be number one among the 12 of them. And we have seen a lot of ambition lately on the campaign trail, and there is certainly more to come. Now, ambition is not something that immediately strikes me about the Jesus we meet in the gospel today. Jesus is trying to keep his secret, his teaching secret, and no one really knows why, but I imagine Jesus had a very good reason. Maybe because he knew as soon as word got out, he would not last long, and he had a lot of work to do. But that's just my speculation. Regardless, Jesus wants his secret kept. The next thing that happens in the gospel is Jesus questioning the disciples. What were they arguing about on the way? He knows that they were arguing about who was going to be the greatest among them. And Jesus has lots of choices how to respond to this. He can chastise, he can reprimand, he can express his frustration. Of course, he can also remind them that he is number one and they are his disciples. But he makes a different choice. He sees those cravings and desires at war within his disciples, which cause them to argue among themselves. And he uses that as an opportunity to teach them. He does not tell them how they ought to be, but rather gives them advice on how to get where they want to be. He recognizes in them the very human desire to do well, to feel good about oneself. And he tells them if they want to do well, if they want to excel, they must put themselves last and become servant of all. This idea of becoming servant is the style of leadership that Jesus exemplified. He is a servant leader. Servant leader is a churchy way of saying it, but it's also one that's a very good description of his style. Jesus led by serving others. Jesus led not by ambition, not by going around seeking votes and setting himself up as the big hero, the popular one, but by simply loving the people that he led through service. Then Jesus takes the child in his arms and tells the disciples, "Welcome one of these, and you are welcoming God." There is holiness in this child, and when you recognize that, you see God. We have a tendency to make this a cute and sweet moment in the life of Jesus' ministry. But in Jesus' day, children were non-entities. They were vulnerable, and they were not considered fully human yet. They were property. This isn't so much about Jesus being cute and endearing, but about Jesus exemplifying the humility that is necessary for greatness. Not the greatness of the world, but spiritual greatness, the greatness of profound faith that is willing to risk what is popular and PC out in the world and to do what is loving and just instead. This is an antidote to the war that is within us, a step toward drawing near God when we take a risk to do what is loving and just. With the election coming up in November, I am struck by how timely these readings are. While not obviously about elections and candidates, the theme of cravings and desires at war within us and then drawing near to God as an antidote is quite good. Now, I think you all probably know by now that I am not a preacher who's going to tell you who to vote for or what to vote for. As an Episcopalian, I believe and celebrate the gift of reason we have been given by God, as well as the gift of the Holy Spirit given to each of us at our baptism. Each of us are able to discern and make a good decision about who and what we vote for this November. We may not agree, but it does not mean we are making a bad decision if there is disagreement among us. I am suggesting that this work of drawing near to God is a good starting point for us in discerning who and what we will vote for. Voting and preparing to vote is truly a spiritual practice. It requires us considering the greater good of all people, the greater good of all God's creation. It requires prayer and discernment. It requires a listening for the Spirit of God inside of us, which will guide us and teach us if we are open to it. So as you prepare to vote this year, remember that this is truly a spiritual practice. Draw near to God, and God will draw near to you.